Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. In today's edition, I want to cover a little bit more on that one cycling, that 250 million euros that could dump into professional cycling over in Europe. And how do they do it? I mean, how do they do it without upsetting the history of the European races? I told you yesterday, I definitely do not want to see 15 days at the Tour de France, 15 days at the Giro, and 15 days at the Vuelta a España. That's ridiculous. But you don't necessarily have to shorten those races to get all the guys showing up at the same races, right? I told you yesterday, I'd love to see them show up 1-2 times where we get all four of the big-time favorites in 2024, Remco, Jonas, Pogačar, and of course, Primož Roglič. Now, how do you get them all showing up at the same races? First off, you go into those races and you up the prize money. Right now, when you look at the Tour de France, they have something ridiculous of about 2.5 million throughout 3 weeks of racing of prize money. The winner at the Tour de France probably takes something, if I remember correctly, about $250,000 in my day. When I won the Vuelta a España, it was $115,000, $116,000 to win a Grand Tour of that 2013 season. We made a measly $13,000 each when it was all split up amongst our teammates. So if one cycling and whoever's throwing in that 250 million euros to try to bring cycling up, what they really need to do to begin with, of course, is you're going to have to up the prize money on some of the smaller races. Go to the monuments. Even the monuments, when I went there, it was like $15,000 to win a monument in my day. Maybe 25 now or something ridiculous. It's small. It's not important. By the time you split it up 10 ways amongst your team, because you're going to have to pay all the riders and split up amongst the riders. Then you're going to have to pay some of the staff too. And then they're going to take some taxes out. Then they're going to take some retirement fund money out. It's ridiculous. Remember, $13,000, if I remember correctly, was what I took for my 2013 Vuelta a España win by the time it was all diced up amongst the Radio Shack guys. So it's ridiculous money. But if you said, hey, we want everybody at Paris-Nice, and the one cycling, whoever, again, is funding this whole budget, they go over to the promoters and they say, hey, how much did you make last year? Okay, well, we'll guarantee you'll make at least that, and then we'll give you a percentage of what we make from your race too. And we'll come in and we'll make 10 times better cameras. We'll have the best quality cameras you could possibly have. And instead of just having 3 or 4 cameras, we'll have 10 cameras everywhere so we can catch the action in all the places where it's happening. And then on top of that, when we look at the field sprint finishes, how many times have we seen the field sprint finishes where the camera loses what's happening? You can't have that happen. If you're watching NFL or you're watching NBA and LeBron James is going up for a slam dunk to win the championships, you can't have the camera miss that. They miss it in pro cycling all the time. So you come in with better cameras and better quality. The riders are wearing jerseys that have their names on it. I mean, if you could at least put the name on the rider's jersey, how ridiculous is it that they're still racing over there and the European peloton's been there for 100 years of bike racing and most of these teams don't have their names on it. I have had a couple jerseys and then maybe the name was about that big on my jersey where you couldn't see it. So spread it wide across the back so they can sell jerseys and everyone understands who they're looking at when they see it on camera. We see Visma Lease bike, a lot of times they have their name right down the center of the helmet there. Let's get more of that going so it's easier to recognize the riders once you bring in those fantastic cameras. Okay, that's one thing to do it. And certainly if you're coming in there with 250 million euros and you have Paris-Nice and you have Trino Adriatico going on at the same time, but you want everyone watching your race. If you throw in $1 million prize list for the winner and then take another million or two and split it up amongst the next top 10, top 20 riders, all of a sudden those riders are not going to be so interested in going to Trino Adriatico. They're going to show up at Paris-Nice. So we will get our 4 favorite riders in 2024 showing up at the same race a few times before we get into the Tour de France. Because that is the only way you're going to get the riders. The amount of money that the riders are making, they're doing the Tour de France. Some of those guys are racing the Tour de France at minimum wage. They're making about $50K. So I can remember doing it my first time with Saunier Duval in 2005. I was a minimum wage rider and add maybe $10,000 to whatever minimum wage that was. I think I was making 50 or 55K that year with Saunier Duval, but they paid me a little bit more for the few months on the year earlier in 2004 because I joined in October actually in 2004. And so because of the way the rules are set with UCI, they had to pay me a little bit in 2004. So basically I was minimum wage in 2005. But I was still at the Tour de France. So if you start throwing in other ways for the riders to start making more money, that will start to bring the riders over to that race. Now, I said cameras, right? So you show up at Paris-Nice again. We'll use that same race as an example. And they got the most fantastic cameras, and it's being just sent out to everybody worldwide. So clear and so easy for people to understand what they're watching. Who's going to want to go over to Trino Adriatico on television when you're sitting on the Chesterfield and say, let me go over to Trino Adriatico where these cameras really are terrible and I can't even make out who's winning and who's crossing the line. I'm going to watch Paris-Nice every time. So when we start really looking at it, you don't have to alter the whole calendar of racing. Just throw in some money into a few of the big races that you want part of your one cycling. And then once you get those races with some more money, they're going to increase the viewership so that when you have 3.5 billion that are watching the Tour de France, maybe you get half of that watching some of these smaller races. Smaller, again, I kind of laugh because when you start thinking Paris-Nice is small, it is small. And when you really look at it financially, it's incredibly tiny. It's terrible. But when you look at where it's at on the calendar, it's pretty popular, right? It's a big race. We all tune in. We know it's the beginning of the season at Paris-Nice, and we're going to tune in and pay attention at Paris-Nice and Trino Adriatico. And then when we get to the classics, we're certainly going to start tuning in when we tune for the 5 monuments that start with Milan-San Remo. And if you start throwing $1 million prize list, there's going to be a fantastic stacked roster showing up at all these races if they know they can win $1 million. And if you only have 10, 20 races, we're talking about probably an extra $2 million of prize money split up and $1 million going to the winner. We're talking about $40 million then that they have to throw in out of a $250 million budget. So you still have a lot of room there to do some good marketing, to do some more documentaries like we saw at Netflix. I thought that was well done. Could it be done even better? Of course it could be done even better. But with more money, with more professionals running it, with more money to have more cameras and more angles even, all of a sudden it is going to look better. And it's going to be like that Formula One Netflix documentary that we all know and watched because it was fantastic and well done. So when you start looking at one cycling, could it be there? Is there room for it? There's absolutely room for it, and I'd love to see him come in. I just don't want to see him come in and destroy the calendar. Make the calendar better and make these other races that don't get the massive viewership start up in that, and then the viewership's going to increase, and then it's going to increase throughout the whole calendar. Even the smaller races that aren't part of one cycling, that even those races will start to get some exposure because 10 or 15 other big races are coming up so big that, of course, fans are going to go, wow, what's next? That was really exciting. They did a fantastic job. Okay, now I'll go over and start watching Trino Adriatico, for example. Maybe One Cycling picks Trino Adriatico over, of course, Paris-Nice. I don't know this whole thing. But I know right now, with that kind of money, you can definitely raise the cycling image and raise the more popularity that it has and make some funding and bring some more money back into the sport. And then, of course, whoever is funding that One Cycling, maybe they can get paid back their $250 million too if they own some rights to the television coverage that everybody's going to tune into because they know how spectacular the viewing is going to be and how good quality racing it's going to be because you're going to have the 4 monument fantastic one-day racers because you know they're all going to be legends, right? Remco is going to be a legend. There's no doubt about it. Primož Roglič already is. Jonas Vingegaard's certainly there. And of course, Tadej Pogačar is there and beyond there with the results that young Slovenian has had throughout his career. So we know if we can get those 4 guys showing up at a few races together before the Tour de France, it will increase the exposure, especially once we get to the Tour de France and the whole cycling scene is going to come up. I hope you guys like my take. There's tons of ways where you can spend $250 million, but right now I got to believe cameras, bigger prize money, and of course, more image, more exposure of those individual riders. And clearly, let's put some names on the back of the riders so we don't have to guess. A lot of times when I'm bringing you guys the butterfly effect, I got to go and look at the finish to figure out which rider that was exactly that I was looking at from the helicopter angle, because the camera was so bad. And guess what? There's no name on the back of the jersey. So help me out. Help me do my job a little bit better. And then, of course, the exposure everywhere around the world is going to be bigger and better for professional cycling. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys on the next edition real soon.